of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador. This is From the South, and I'm Camila Escalante. The largest U.S. oil producer has sued Cuban state-owned Cuba-Petroleo and the CIMEX Corporation in U.S. federal court. ExxonMobil is taking Cuba to court over a refinery, gas stations, and other assets, which were nationalized in 1960 following the revolution. The news comes a day after the Trump administration allowed the U.S.'s long-dormant Helms-Burton Act to take effect. Cuba says that the act violates international law as its nationalization of property was legal. The government says the full application of the act is political blackmail to toughen the economic and financial blockade against its people. Meanwhile, Canada and the EU and other countries have threatened to take the issue to the World Trade Organization.
Cuban law protects us. The Helms-Burton law is null and void, and the majority of the countries that have investment and operation with Cuba. In Cuba today, there are anti-duty laws that penalize companies that allow themselves to be pressured or that agree to act under a foreign law.
The so-called Lima group, or group of Latin American countries allied with the United States, has ended a meeting on Venezuela with no concrete conclusions. 11 countries gathered in the capital of Peru for a meeting expected to announce decisive action. The final declaration did give explicit support to last Tuesday's failed coup attempt by Juan Guaido, but otherwise it repeated the group's earlier positions. Neither Mexico nor Guyana or St. Lucia attended. The Spanish government has said it will not allow Venezuelan opposition figure Leopoldo Lopez to carry out political activities from its embassy in Caracas. Lopez took refuge in the Spanish embassy on Tuesday after escaping house arrest and taking part in a failed coup attempt. Spain's Foreign Minister Josep Borrell was speaking on a visit to Lebanon.
Spain will not permit its embassy to be converted into a center of political activity. We also are confident that under these conditions, Venezuela will respect the diplomatic immunity of the Spanish embassy.
Tensions have increased at Venezuela's embassy in Washington, D.C., where activists continue to defend Venezuela's diplomatic offices from being taken over by members of the opposition. Our correspondent, Alina Duarte, has the latest details.
Tensions have escalated in Venezuela's embassy in Washington, D.C.
They have physically assaulted the peaceful activists. They have been hurling verbal abuse since 5 o'clock yesterday. They have done destruction to the building. And unfortunately, the Secret Service police, as well as the Metropolitan Police, have been standing by and not doing anything about it.
After the Embassy Defense Collective gave a press conference, activists tried to get food and medicine into the building, but members of the Venezuelan opposition reportedly prevented them from getting the supplies.
Get out of here, you communists! Go to the hole!
We're here to bring food and medicine inside. The Secret Service is not preventing the opposition from presenting people getting inside. The opposition has been very violent, very aggressive in blocking people from getting in and out, and the Secret Service is not protecting.
There is still a possibility that the Venezuelan opposition will succeed on taking over the embassy building. They have already taken 3 other diplomatic offices in Washington and New York.
Right-wing mob has been doing here is completely illegal, and not only is it illegal, but the Secret Service, the federal police agencies, and the local police agencies are standing by, watching it happen, taking no action to stop these illegal assaults, the physical violence against the building, the physical violence against people. They're facilitating this, and we've sent a letter to the director of the U.S. Secret Service, to the chief of the D.C. Police Department, telling them that we're going to take action to hold them accountable for violation of civil rights.
In the afternoon, the atmosphere remained tense, but those arrested in the morning were released. Following the failed attempt coup in Venezuela, U.S. President Donald Trump wished the best to the people of the Latin American country and said he is on their side. But President Trump failed to mention that the economic sanctions his administration has imposed on the country have had hard consequences. According to the Center of Economic and Political Research, the sanctions have negatively impacted the lives of at least 40,000 Venezuelans.
Washington, D.C.
The Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Keith Rowley, has called on CARICOM leaders to ensure the continued security and stability of the region in light of the situation in Venezuela. Dr. Rowley, who is the chairman of the Security Council for CARICOM and Law Enforcement, made the statement at the opening of the 19th special meeting of the Conference of CARICOM Heads of Government underway in Trinidad. Meanwhile, the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines says that they stand ready to assist Venezuela in light of the recent events, calling them disturbing. In a statement, Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves reaffirmed his country's commitment to upholding the UN Charter principles of respect for sovereignty, the rule of law, non-intervention, and non-interference. This week, thousands of social leaders were in Bogota in what was called a refuge for life. They demand guarantees to life and freedom, as they say the government of Colombia has breached a number of promises. Afro-descendant communities, campesinos, and indigenous people held a number of actions to highlight issues, including the assassination of social leaders, forced displacement, and disappearances in their territories. Earlier, I spoke with Ben Norton, a journalist with the Gray Zone, who is in Bogota, Colombia, covering the mobilizations this week.
Colombia to report on what should be all over the English language corporate media, but of course is largely ignored, and that's the largest crisis of assassinations of activists in the entire world. Colombia has the dubious honor of having the highest rate of assassinations of human rights activists, more than any other country. And since 2016 in November, when the government of the former President Santos signed a peace agreement, a historic agreement with the FARC, and the FARC agreed to demilitarize and became a legal party. Since then, more than 550 peace activists and social activists from different groups have been assassinated, including more than 130 members of the FARC itself. So former ex-combatants who agreed to put down their weapons and sign a peace agreement with the government, more than 130 have been assassinated, including some of their family members. So I came here to report on that. And Refugio Humanitario is an event that was over a series of 5 days that was highlighting the crisis here of assassinations, not only targeting former guerrillas from the communist groups, but also targeting indigenous activists, Afro-Colombian activists, women's rights activists, labor organizers, campesinos. All of these people are being targeted by paramilitaries that are linked to the government and that are linked to large landowners, large capitalists, and multinational corporations. So I, as a journalist, want to shed light on this. I think the entire corporate media should be talking about this. Instead, they're fixating obsessively on official enemies of the U.S. government, like Venezuela. And that hypocrisy is really striking to me, being here in the capital of Colombia and looking at the failed right-wing coup attempt in Venezuela. There's an obsessive fixation with Venezuela right next door, but almost nothing is said about the extreme violence going on right here in Colombia, a major U.S. ally, of course. The irony is that the Santos administration, which was also a right-wing administration, when they signed the peace agreement, it of course wasn't out of the kindness of their hearts. It wasn't because they necessarily want peace itself. One of the reasons they did it is because by ending part of the armed conflict, they could help further neoliberal development in the country and give, external contracts to multinational corporations. And I've been interviewing indigenous leaders, Afro-Colombian leaders in more rural departamentos here in Colombia. And one of the things that they're talking about is how, although of course it's good that the civil war has at least partially ended, although there still is violence. Although that part is good, the downside is that now that the FARC and some of these communists have demilitarized, now the Iván Duque administration is creating its own plan de desarrollo, its own plan of development, which is a very neoliberal right-wing plan that is allowing multinational corporations to mine resources on their land, which is leading to a lot of displacement of indigenous Afro-Colombian and Campesino Colombians here. Also, we have seen the massive increase in monoculture production. So the thing was that these, guerrillas, the FARC and others, were essentially defending the land from multinational corporations. And now that they've demilitarized, multinational corporations have free access to exploit this area. And it's leading to not only violence, but displacement. And in that way, a lot of people are, they're excited about the potential of a partial peace agreement, but they keep saying that the peace has not gone far enough. The government has not fulfilled all of its obligations under the already existing agreement. And the Duque administration is even more right-wing than the Santos administration and is following in the footsteps of the far-right Uribe administration that came before it.
Over 2.7 million of Panamanian citizens are set to participate in general elections on Sunday, the 5th of May. Even 7 candidates are running for office, with the candidate for the Democratic Revolutionary Party, Laurentino Cortizo, leading the polls. Romulo Rue from the Democratic Change Party follows Cortizo as independent candidate. Ricardo Lombana holds 3rd place. An Ecuadorian court has rejected the appeal of Swedish national Ola Bini, and he will remain in pre-trial detention. He's accused of an alleged cyber attack and of collaborating with WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. Bini's lawyer requested his pre-trial detention be annulled so that he can defend himself freely. But one of the judges said that there's a risk of Bini interfering with the investigation if he's released due to his expertise in computing. We'll take a short break now. Join us again in a minute. Welcome back. A cruise ship that had been quarantined for a confirmed measles case is now heading to Curacao. It left St. Lucia and is scheduled to arrive in the Dutch Caribbean island early Saturday. But authorities in Curacao have been debating how to respond to this Church of Scientology vessel with 300 people aboard. The ship's doctor requested 100 vaccines after a female crew member was diagnosed with measles. That patient has reportedly rejoined the group and left St. Lucia late Thursday. Business and consumer confidence in Jamaica has reached record levels as it continues to implement an ambitious program of economic reforms. During an official visit to the island, the vice president of the Latin America and Caribbean World Bank says he's impressed with Jamaica's macroeconomic achievements.
I have to tell you that it is extremely impressive what I see in terms of the achievements macroeconomically. I don't know any country, and I've worked on many countries, that has achieved over a sustained period of time the fiscal adjustment and reforms that Jamaica has done and produced a most spectacular reduction of its debt levels that reached almost 150% to fall this year below 100%. I can only congratulate the country for this. It's certainly a world achievement. Probably you would be number one in terms of that success.
Barbados remains in recession, with the economy contracting by roughly 0.2% in the first quarter. And while economic growth is predicted to be no more than 0.25% this year, the central bank governor says that he believes the island can achieve the spurt in growth that it needs. A team from the International Monetary Fund will be in Barbados next week to check the progress of the economic reforms. This as the government is set to receive another $49 million from the IMF. And Barbados' Prime Minister Mia Mottly is opening up the island's media landscape. The government will be permitting other entities to apply for licenses to operate television stations. During a ceremony to rename Nation House, Mottly said it is not right that state-owned Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation is allowed to continue to operate as a monopoly. She declared, quote, "We have committed to removing that because it is wrong, wrong, wrong." The European Union and other countries have criticized Ugandan authorities' decision to suspend dozens of journalists for allegedly breaching minimum broadcasting standards. On Thursday, Uganda's media regulator ordered 13 TV and radio stations to suspend 39 staff. The move was seen as punishment for stations that had broadcast this week's arrest of opposition MP Bobi Wine. In a joint statement, the diplomats urged the Ugandan government to respect the rule of law and allow all Ugandans to exercise their basic democratic rights. The World Health Organization says 994 people have died from the ongoing Ebola epidemic in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The number is expected to hit 1,000 soon, amid fears of continued intense transmission of the virus. The organization plans to expand vaccination with an unlicensed new Ebola vaccine made by Johnson & Johnson, in addition to a Merck vaccine already being used. Security incidents continue to hamper the response to the outbreak.
As of 1st of May, we have 1,510 cases of Ebola virus disease in North Kivu and Ituri provinces of the Democratic Republic of Congo, which includes 994 deaths. Dr. Tedros and Dr. Moeti, our regional director, have recently returned from the Democratic Republic of Congo, where they found the situation on the ground to be worse than it has been previously.
The government of Malawi has started relocating Cyclone Idai victims to higher ground. Working with development partners, the government says that it hopes this will also avoid future disasters. Shelter boxes and kits are being provided for the victims, while food and agriculture organizations have provided crop seeds. 14 new cases of cholera have been detected in Mozambique, in the province of Cabo Delgado, where Cyclone Kenneth recently hit. According to authorities, since last week, cases of diarrhea have been increasing, as currently 69 people have the disease. Authorities say that they're ready to tackle the situation. Small farmers in Eastern Africa are organizing to fight against new legislation that would greatly affect their work in countries like Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Burundi, or Rwanda. These farmers believe these laws only serve corporate interests.
Each farmer should have a copy of this law, a law for crops and for food, and of other laws as well which are threatening the work and resources of farmers.
If people are firm and demand respect for the 2010 Constitution, those laws will not pass.
These laws will disregard the basic principles of justice and freedom and directly will violate the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The peasant farmer has not been involved, the civil society is not involved. Our seeds are our lives.
That law is actually attacking the backbone and the center of the rural life of our people. It's unconstitutional, and we are calling for all farmers.
According to the law's ambiguous text, indigenous seeds and animal manure could no longer be used.
Supply us with this fertilizer, but from that fertilizer is the generation of this Baratika.
This is a plant that destroys corn crops from the roots, according to Okundi. In his house, Okundi cultivates indigenous seeds of a fruit he initially brought from the forest. He now has a bank of seeds.
And in 50 shillings, you get one seedling. You get even 100, and in 50 shillings, you get one seedling. That's why I told those people.
This is a variety of fruit that, like the forest of Migori, is in danger of extinction.
I'm expecting to get about 60 to 100 per month. Yeah. So.
He cultivates it in his orchard with cow's manure.
So sweet compared to the exotic ones.
The first one goes, the following started that way, for 12 months non-stop.
How long?
20 to 25 years. It engaged another opinion in my brain to use another method against the wind.
So your main challenge is wind?
Wind.
Maybe we can start thinking of how can we develop strong structures, especially in the AK project.
Okundi also develops commercial seeds to investigate and document their growth.
And graft it to this one. You can see the volume of this size and this one.
Yeah. It's different.
How do you compare if those people are telling us they are going to burn it, and when I put the exotic one, it destroys the plant, and this one...
The plant is doing well.
Healthy.
I think these people, they must have a very dangerous plan.
We know that chemical inputs are harmful and are continued to be used. Wake up.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. Israeli forces have killed 3 Palestinians, including a 19-year-old, during weekly Great March of Return protests along the border in Gaza. Earlier, 2 other Palestinians were killed in airstrikes on Gaza. Israel said that they were members of Hamas and that the strikes were a response to gunfire that wounded 2 Israeli soldiers. Hundreds of Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces since the protests began back in March 2018. The United Nations has called on Israeli authorities to immediately halt the demolition of Palestinian-owned homes in East Jerusalem. UN Humanitarian Coordinator for Palestine, Jami McGoldrick, expressed concern at the increase in the numbers of homes being demolished every month. More than 100 houses have been destroyed since January, leaving hundreds of families homeless. Israeli authorities frequently demolish Palestinian homes for allegedly being built without permits. 2 people have died after Cyclone Fani struck eastern India. Thousands more in the state of West Bengal have been given orders to flee. Electricity and water have also been cut for much of the people in the city of 200,000. The cyclone is expected to barrel northeast towards Bangladesh on Saturday. May 3rd marks World Press Freedom Day to commemorate the journalists who've lost their lives while on duty and in defense of the principles of press freedom. According to analysts, at least 250 journalists were jailed last year as Mexico was ranked as one of the deadliest countries for media workers. And countries like the United States, Brazil, and Hungary have significantly slipped down in the World Press Freedom Index rankings. On World Press Freedom Day, the UK government has declared its support for a free press. That's despite its recent jailing of journalist and co-founder of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange. Our correspondent Pablo Navarrete reports.
On the 11th of April, the Ecuadorian government withdrew the political asylum of WikiLeaks' founder Julian Assange, who had been in its UK embassy since June 2012. Immediately after this, Assange was arrested by the British Secret Police and remains in custody in the Belmarsh High Security Prison in London. At present, British courts are processing an extradition request to the United States at the request of the Trump government.
What we've been told so far is that he will face a charge of conspiring with Chelsea Manning to leak US classified documents. But the truth is that that is just the first charge. And there is no doubt that once he is in the US, he will face much more serious charges.
Thank you for coming along to this. To coincide with World Press Freedom Day, this 3rd of May, UK Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt tweeted, "If we believe in media freedom as one of the fundamental bastions of a free society, then we need to stand up and talk about the dangers that journalists now face." Given the detention of Julian Assange by the British government, many are questioning the sincerity of such declarations.
They use the rhetoric of press freedom for when it's convenient against perceived enemies overseas. But when it actually comes to real issues of freedom of the press at home, the British government is completely and utterly on the side of the censors, and the detention of Julian Assange, the publisher of WikiLeaks, is a prime example of that.
Free speech, free Assange.
This week, British courts began proceedings that will determine whether the UK will allow Julian Assange to be extradited to the US. One of Assange's key lawyers, Jennifer Robinson, has said that the outcome of the case could have grave consequences on the future of journalism. The new director of WikiLeaks, Kristin Hrafnsson, also had a message for the British government.
Well, a message to the UK government on Press Freedom Day is to think about every journalist and every publisher and every editor that is in prison at the moment. And that includes Julian Assange, who is sitting in Her Majesty's prison in Barbados.
Despite the British government's declarations on the importance of respecting the freedom of the press as a key pillar for a healthy democracy and international freedom of expression, its behaviour in the Assange case casts doubts on the credibility of its commitments to press freedom. Pablo Navarrete, Telesur, London.
We've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Camila Escalante. Thanks for watching.